Hey guys, welcome to episode 114 of The Green Life. Today's episode is a little controversial. We're going to talk about pets' food. Yeah, but not just that. We're going to talk about the fact that maybe a pet diet can be plant-based. And I know what a lot of people are thinking because I'm vegan and I never thought that a cat could be plant-based, but I'm about to be proven wrong by my guest, Dr. Andrew Knight. Dr. Knight has been on a search for answers, and he has been on the lifestyle. He's been working as a professor of veterinary medicine as well as ethics and welfare for many years all over the world. And so he has really been sharing this message powerfully. And today he will share his background and also the research and what he found that a vegan diet can do for our beloved furry friends. Alright guys, before we get into the episode, I just want to give a big shout out to NamaWell. As you know, I love my juices and everything this company stands for. So if you want to grab 10% to buy yourself the C2, the J2, or any other machines that they have, please go into the show notes and grab it. Now, if you want to work with me and check out Dr. Morse's Herbs, New Zest, and Window Workshop, I'm an affiliate of these companies. I use them myself, and I've shared the discount codes and links in the show notes as well. And if you want to know more, you can reach out to me. I also shared my work, so if you are a woman looking to get answers for your hormones, just talk to me about it, as well as come on retreats. Check out the blueprint for your hormones and how you can get really thriving with your life. All right, guys, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Welcome, Dr. Knight. Hello, Andrew. Thank you so much for being on The Green Life today. How are you?
I'm good. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very honored that you accepted the invitation. I know you have a very busy schedule. We're traveling all around the world, but I also value all the input that you have put in out to the world. And I've been, obviously, I had the pleasure of meeting you in 2019 at Coraveg in Portugal, and I was very impressed with the information that you were sharing because it's very controversial to speak about the things we're going to talk about, especially pet food. So before we get into that though, I would love people to, if they don't know you, to get a little bit of your background and how you became a vet and why you actually chose to follow the path of animal welfare, but mostly to talk about a plant-based option for animals.
Great. I recall the event in Portugal. It was great to meet you, and it's great to have the chance to tell your audience about this really exciting topic. It's the latest of a series of controversial animal welfare topics that I've been involved in. So looking forward to talking about that. Perfect.
Okay, so let's start with your background in terms of your history, how you got where you are now.
Sure. I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, which is an incredibly beautiful city with stunning beaches, blue skies, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but it has a dark secret, which is it's the world capital of the live sheep export trade. And we were exporting about 5 million sheep a year, mostly to Middle Eastern countries on just about the longest sea voyage in the world, about 2.5 weeks, during which up to 150,000 sheep would die on the ships each year because of bad conditions on the ships and failure to adapt to the pelletized diet. So this is one of the biggest animal welfare issues in the world. When I got involved, and I campaigned for about a year on this and thought it felt really fulfilling to be doing something that was making a difference to really large numbers of sentient animals. And I thought, how can I get a career doing this kind of work long term? And I thought I should try to study really hard, get into the veterinary school and become a veterinarian so that I could get specialised knowledge and more credibility when speaking about these issues. So I did that. All seemed to be going well until I ran into harmful animal use in the veterinary curriculum on a large scale, which wasn't really good for an animal welfare advocate. And I then got drawn sideways into a huge campaign to end some of those very invasive animal experiments which were occurring in the veterinary curriculum, and to bring in humane teaching methods. And that was ultimately successful. I nearly failed the degree in the process. I sort of had to spend more time on that than on my studies. But we succeeded, and we set up humane teaching methods on a large scale. We passed the university policy whereby the university agreed to provide alternatives to students who conscientiously objected to harming animals in their curriculum. And that was then copied, and the same thing happened in other Australian vet schools and some internationally. And we had the first students graduate from all vet schools in Australia without harming animals in their degrees by 2005. I finished at the end of 2001. So then I went to the UK, as many graduates from Australia do initially, and practiced in small animal practice, treating dogs and cats for about a decade. I published studies looking at educational animal use and alternatives and animal experiments and alternatives. Published a book called The Costs and Benefits of Animal Experiments, and got a PhD critiquing animal experiments. And then I went to the Caribbean for 2 years to teach at the world's second largest vet school, Ross University on St Kitts. And I was in charge of veterinary clinical and surgical skills training in the clinical skills laboratory that we had. And I did that for a couple of years, and then went to the University of Winchester, 1 hour south of London, to set up a centre for animal welfare, which became one of the most active, I think, in the world, really. So we produced a lot of research and publications, communications about animal welfare issues, and set up 3 degrees. My degree was a distance learning master's degree that has been a small factory for animal advocates around the world, because you can do it anywhere in the world and part-time. So people have been passing through that and going on to advocate on behalf of animals around the world, which has been fantastic. And then a year and a half ago, I set up my own non-profit to work full-time on animal advocacy. And I currently have been doing a lot of research and publishing scientific studies about vegan pet diets, and just done another PhD on that. And now I get to talk around the world at scientific conferences and food industry conferences on that issue. And it's been going extremely well. So very grateful to have had the chance to have this career and make such a difference to really large numbers of animals. So yeah, thank you.
It is amazing. And what I love about it is that not many vets even think about these issues of animal welfare. It's like, it's like in the medical field, even for humans. I was considering becoming an MD, and I actually opted for ND, naturopathic, because there were some things that I just couldn't get behind. And not that I think all medication is bad, and I don't think that surgery is. I actually think the advance of medicine has helped humans and animals alike, and we need it. But equally, we always go extreme, and we just don't see that there is a balance and natural law to respect as well. And we lose that sometimes when we are in academia. So I really value when we actually can bring to the forefront these issues and talk about the bigger picture and think about things, and perhaps are not part of the curriculum, but they are part of our life if we really want to be part of the ecosystem. So
absolutely, yeah. There's some interesting set of reasons why veterinarians do not become more active advocates for animals, despite the obvious need for that and consistency with the ideals of the veterinary profession. So yes, I very much understand what you're saying with respect to things like medical education, the involvement of these professionals. Things are getting better, fortunately, over the long term. There have been a number of veterinary organisations established for vets that want to be animal advocates in a number of countries just in the last 5 or 10 years. So things are getting better, fortunately.
Yeah. And tell me, when did you actually transition to becoming vegan yourself?
That was an awfully long time ago, when I was 23, and I'm over 50 now, so a very long time ago. And I did it to try to impress my girlfriend at the time with how ethical I was regarding animal use in the food system, I suppose. And she went vegan at the same time to try to impress me, and we're still good friends many years later. So that is amazing for multiple reasons.
I'm gonna add that you're still impressing your current partner, because she is a very powerful woman who is the CEO of ProVeg. So it's like that impression, that the impressing still goes on both sides, actually.
Yes, I'm very delighted to have helped my wife Yasmin Debo to see that it was possible, even in the rural Netherlands where she was living a long time ago, to actually become a vegan. She was a little skeptical at first, but we got there pretty quickly. So and now, as you say, she's the global CEO of ProVeg International, the biggest plant-based organisation in the world, in well over 10 countries at the moment, and growing fast. So hopefully, if I don't achieve anything else, but at least I've achieved encouraging her to become vegan, then my life is worthwhile and I can take the rest of my years off.
I think you've achieved way more than that, and we are very grateful. So, okay, perfect. Now we have the basics covered about your background and being vegan, which is really important. And it's funny because I was talking to the vet that takes care of my pets here, and I haven't found one single vegan pet vet here. But he said to me, "I know, I'm a hypocrite. I eat my clients." I'm like, okay, if you know that, why do you do it? And it's like this dissonance that is just so embedded in humans. And I mean, I completely understand and actually don't judge it, because I was that person. I was that person that was completely living in dissonance until I went into plant-based for health, actually, because I was listening to Neil Barnard about diabetes, and I actually had high glucose and cholesterol, and I was like, okay, I'm 30 years old, this doesn't make sense. So I started changing towards plant-based for health. But 2 months in, at my first Thanksgiving as a plant-based person, I didn't want to upset my mother-in-law, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna have the turkey. And the moment I tried that piece of meat, I was like, I'm eating flesh. For the first time in my life, I actually connected the dots, which is why I have empathy for people, because we really don't have those dots. So we don't see where the animals come from. We don't actually even think that the food in front of us is part of is a body part from a human being, even though we call it, like leg. And it's like something doesn't connect in the brain. So how do you think, from your experience, from talking to students, from doing public speaking, that we can actually create a bit of awareness and consciousness within, especially the veterinary schools and students, to become plant-based and to actually understand that it starts with them, so they can actually really serve the animals they love and they want to save, right?
I think it's really difficult in many veterinary schools. The veterinary profession has its origins in treating horses owned by wealthy people and in helping farms to maximise the productivity and profitability of farming animals. It's kind of like engineers tinkering the system to maximise productivity for the farmers. So that's where all the money used to be. Nowadays, in wealthy nations like the UK, where I currently am, there's a lot more disposable income than there used to be, and pet ownership has risen in association with that, and 95% of vets work treating dogs and cats nowadays. But nevertheless, the origins of the profession were involved in being involved in those industries, and there's an awful lot of research that still occurs within veterinary schools, which is funded by those industries. And the dominant sort of cultural mode of thought is that animal farming is good, it's necessary, it's an important part of society, and the veterinary profession's role is to support that. So students are taught this both in an overt and a more covert way throughout their degrees. And I think it's really important to educate students about the animal welfare problems that occur in the farming of most animal species in the production systems, and because of the genetics of the animals as well, which are also geared to maximal productivity and result in various animal welfare problems. And to, I suppose, have speakers like me come in and tell them that you can have careers actually advocating for animals. You can do an awful lot more good when you work on issues that can affect thousands or millions of animals, rather than just the individual patients that you'll see on a day-to-day basis. And you can have really exciting, interesting careers doing this kind of work as well. And it is the best way to uphold the core values that many of these students came into veterinary school with, if not all of them or most of them, which is to try to advance the welfare of animals. It's very unusual to have voices like me say that kind of thing in veterinary schools. And there are more veterinarians doing this nowadays, but the numbers are very low. I've just recently spoken at a series of veterinary schools in the United Kingdom, and I am keen to talk at others to try to encourage these students to think about these sorts of issues and to hopefully make the right choices.
Yeah,
So if any of your listeners has any contacts with universities and those student groups that would like me to speak, then please look me up online. I'm super easy to find. I'm Andrew Knight, and I am keen to talk to student groups anywhere in person.
We will put all your links in the show notes anyway, and we'll definitely close with this because later, because I really want people to be prompted to make those changes. Equally, I will also look into what we can do. I am organizing a conference here because Code of Edge stopped, unfortunately, and I am really keen to bring something to bigger even than that. And so I am really pushing the municipality of Braga to be involved because they are really keen to be part of sustainability. And we have seen, unfortunately, even in this, when it comes to sustainability and ecosystem, even the COP has failed at actually promoting a plant-based option that could save the planet, because there is so much financial interest from industry, especially animal agriculture. As you said, even when you go to school, like, you actually learn how to look after animals so that they become more productive for the human, rather than actually saving them and looking after them, making sure they're healthy to have a good life, which is, again, another contradiction of the human condition, I guess. But definitely I want to trickle down from vet to humans. But before we do that, if a vet student is thinking, actually, I would like to have a career that has more value than just, looking after dogs and cats and giving them medicine and doing the neutering. I want to do something that will allow me to have this animal welfare part into my practice, whether they decide to open their own clinic or go work for hospitals and clinic. What is the step that they should take? Because I feel like when I speak to vet students, and I'm kind of meeting so many, they don't really know what to do next. So they go and search for the next opportunity after university to do the internships. And oftentimes these opportunities come from agriculture industry, and not really from places where, like, sanctuaries or even where they can learn about welfare. There's not many opportunities. Where do you think they should go and look?
I think students should start by getting a couple of years of experience in veterinary practice. And what I did was to treat dogs and cats rather than working on farms. And that can then become a career that can be your bread and butter. So it will always provide you with an income and the opportunity to travel and do good wherever you are. That's important because actual jobs as an animal advocate that can support you are not very common, although they're becoming much more common than they used to be. Having gotten a couple of years of experience so that you are confident and competent with surgery and medicine and practicing being a vet, I would encourage people to think about becoming professional animal advocates. And the way to do that, I suppose, is to start by becoming more highly qualified in animal welfare. People can work towards becoming specialists in animal welfare. It's a veterinary specialisation. The master's degree I set up at the University of Winchester was really designed for animal advocates, and it also maps onto the curriculum that vets need to cover to become animal welfare specialists. So that's an option. And then start to, I think, try to look for opportunities to support campaigns. There are many groups out there with campaigns in all sorts of areas. People can also do their own research and think about starting their own organisations and trying to get funding, which is what I've recently done. But you would have the skills to do that if you were a vet that had particularly gone through a master's degree like mine or one of the others that exist. You'd be able to do research and publish scientific studies and give talks at conferences and so on, and be a scientific advocate for animals and upholding their welfare. And then you can start to be involved and hopefully have real impact on issues that can literally affect millions or even billions of animals, which are the kind of issues that I work on nowadays. So it is possible. It's a long pathway to become an animal welfare specialist as a veterinarian. But I would say it's the most exciting, rewarding, positive career that any vet could have, actually. So I do recommend getting onto the pathway and moving forward. And a very bright future, I think. is available to vets that can manage to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially as things are rapidly changing on the planet. And I think it's really nice when people do things that are not mainstream and they start a movement, as you have done, because sure, you have done it in a time where really it was even harder because we didn't have social media up to like a decade and a half ago, or even less than that. We had YouTube like at the beginning of 2000 wasn't really that big. Like we can get to more people rapidly and create movements, but we have to also do it in a balanced way. What I like about you is that when you talk about it, you talk in a scientific way, very rational, but with empathy, because again, I think we understand where the starting point is, what the struggles are, even the obstacles are, and that allows us to then find a solution so that people don't feel judged, because that's something that unfortunately happens in the vegan movement in general. We can get so emotional that we start attacking people that are not on board and they don't get it, and they feel they want to do is put resistance up. You're not actually getting through to them. So we have to do it in a very kind way. So let's trickle down. We talked about how maybe vet students can get into this field, starting also from their choices. And, they can start thinking, okay, I can go more plant-based. I can be a little bit more conscious about what I'm eating, thinking about where the food comes from. Very important parts. But then it needs to trickle down to the clients, right? So say to people that have pets and are looking after them. When it comes to food, it's not an issue when it comes to big animals because they naturally eat grass. Unfortunately, we also have problems there where they're giving grains when they're not really meant to because they get fatter, and that's another problem with animal welfare, I guess. What they're fed is not necessarily their natural food, especially in CAFO operations. But the ones that choose to, if we are talking about dogs and cats, then we choose to give our pets food every day to make sure they're healthy. And a lot of the times we know that the food in the stores are not exactly healthy. And there are some challenges, and I'll bring them up. But you have done a very good presentation about pet food, and I know this is something you focus on when it comes to pet food that can be actually plant-based instead of having the byproducts or leftovers of animal parts from CAFO industry. So if we maybe can give a little bit of a background about where our pet food comes from, why it's been created in a certain way, how it's created, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So for both dogs and cats, 90 to 95% of all food consumed is dry kibble. And the dry kibble is 45 to 50% plant materials, and the rest is animal source materials. Of the animal source materials, about 3/4 is animal byproducts. That's globally, it changes a bit in wealthier nations like the US, but about 3/4 globally is byproducts of the human food production system. So these are the offcuts of animal carcasses that we don't normally consider edible by people. So these would be things like hooves, ligaments, tendons, hides, and various organs which people don't normally want to eat. So these are cheaper. They have a lower economic value. So they're bought up by the pet food industry, used within the animal-based ingredients within pet food to lower the cost of production. Really interestingly, this actually, not only are these lower quality ingredients for the animals, but it actually increases the environmental impact. Because the proportion of the carcasses used to provide these byproducts is a much smaller proportion than the proportion used to provide meat. So to get the same quantity, you need more carcasses, which means more livestock animals, which means a bigger environmental impact. So it actually increases the environmental impacts by doing this quite substantially. I've published a number of studies looking at things like health outcomes and also environmental outcomes. And the most recent study calculated what the environmental benefits would be if the world's dogs and cats transitioned onto nutritionally sound vegan diets. And they're quite spectacular, actually. If all the world's pet dogs, so not the stray and free roaming dogs, community owned, which are often also fed dog food, but just the individually owned pet dogs, and there's 470 million of those, or there were about 6 years ago, which is when we had these figures. It'd be more now. But if they're all transitioned, then you free up more greenhouse gases than produced by the entire United Kingdom, a lot more greenhouse gases than produced by the entire United Kingdom. you'd save enough food energy to feed 450 million additional people, which is larger than the human population of the EU. So there are enormous sustainability benefits. You would also spare 6 billion land animals a year from being slaughtered in the food system. As I say, these figures are a bit old because they rely upon 2018 dog and cat populations, and the populations globally are a bit bigger now. But even back then, it would have saved 6 billion land animals from being killed in the food system, and another 1 billion if we were to transition our cats as well. So there are huge sustainability benefits, big benefits for the environment, number of food animal lives that would be spared, and food energy savings that could enable us to feed many millions of additional people on the planet. This is important when we remember that about 1 in every 9 people currently suffer from hunger and malnutrition, because even though we produce enough grain to feed double the human population of the earth, an awful lot of that grain is fed to livestock animals, which is then wasted during conversion process and effectively lost during the conversion, meaning that there is a grain shortage after that step, meaning that 1 in every 9 people suffer from hunger and malnutrition. So yeah, food security is really important. These results are, I think, incredibly important because we've never thought that diet change for dogs and cats is part of the overall move toward plant-based diets that we know is necessary to seriously address the challenges of climate change. We know that the animal agriculture sector contributes at least 20% of all human-generated greenhouse gases, so it's a really big contributor. It's bigger than all the planes, trucks, cars, buses, forms of transport globally, which has been calculated at 13.5%. So it's a lot bigger than that. So we know that a transition toward plant-based diets is needed to seriously deal with the challenges posed by climate change and biodiversity loss, land deforestation and so on. The livestock sector is also probably the biggest cause of deforestation on the planet. But no one's really realised until very recently that this also needs to include diet change for dogs and cats. But actually, according to my the study that I recently published in the journal PLOS One, which is one of the top open access scientific journals, in wealthy nations with high pet ownership, at least 20% of all livestock animals aren't consumed by humans. They're consumed within pet food for dogs and cats, mostly dogs. And globally, it's about 9%. So we shouldn't be leaving dogs and cats out of this picture. They are a significant contributor of livestock animals, and changing their diets to nutritionally sound vegan diets would have major positive benefits for the environment, for farmed animal welfare, and even free up a lot of food energy that would help us to address human hunger and malnutrition as well.
So that is really good to know, and statistics we don't actually see anywhere, so I will want to share your studies in the show notes as well. But I do have a I guess devil's advocate question. People will ask, okay, but not the whole world is going to go vegan, so isn't it better to use the leftovers of animals that we used for human consumption to then bring it into the pet food industry and make sure that basically doesn't go to waste, because you can't really do anything with it. Really, it's not compostable.
And that's a really common narrative which has been created by the pet food industry. It's not actually true. So this material doesn't go to waste. Nothing would go to landfill and to waste. It gets consumed by a wide variety of other manufacturing sectors. So we're talking about the chemical industry, pharmaceuticals, all sorts of household products. Only 1/4 of all animal byproducts actually end up in pet food. Their use in pet food increases the price slightly. If they weren't used in pet food, the price of these ingredients would drop slightly, and they would be consumed by these other social sectors. They would never go to landfill. So it's not beneficial recycling something that would otherwise be wasted. That's the first point. The second point is that the animal byproduct component of the animal ingredients in pet food needs more carcasses to produce that component, because there's a small proportion of the carcass that produces byproducts. If you got rid of those byproducts and replaced them with human grade meat, you would need less animal carcasses to produce that, which means that the number of livestock animals would fall really quite substantially. So use of animal byproducts does lower the cost of pet food slightly because byproducts are cheaper than meat. Doesn't beneficially recycle anything. It increases the number of livestock animals by about 1.4 to 1.9, depending on whether it's dogs or cats. And so it substantially increases the environmental footprint, nearly doubles it in the latter case.
Wow,
So
okay.
It's not beneficial at all. The narrative that it is beneficial, and it's beneficial recycling, is something that's been put out by the pet food industry and by the meat industry to falsely represent what's actually happening here.
That's really interesting. See, those are conversations that we never have. Like, we don't even hear it when we talk about the environment. Again, one of the places you should be at is the COP, like, and talk about what's going on with that industry. Because we talk about so many things, planes, and like actually the percentage of travel on the impact on the environment is so little in comparison to the other things that we do every day, especially as we grow in population around the world. And
yeah, it's striking that if you think that for the whole transportation sector, if that produces 13.5% of greenhouse gases, there are armies of people around the world working on sustainable transport. If we have a sector here that is potentially responsible, I'm talking about the whole animal agriculture sector, maybe for 20% of greenhouse gases, or actually probably more, according to more recent studies. The number of people working on plant-based diets are very low compared to sustainable transport. And for pets, it's almost nobody. There's myself, there's a researcher in Canada and her team who have done a lot of the other studies. And then there are the companies who are producing plant-based pet foods, and that's it globally. So it's the most neglected, potentially beneficial way, I think, of addressing greenhouse gas emissions and climate change.
Yeah, totally. Oh my God. Okay. So with that shock, the next thing obviously is talking about the health of our pets. And even within the industry, vet industry, when we talk about omnivore diet for our pets, even then there is controversy because, of course, there are vets that are thinking these dry kibbles are actually harming our pets. They're not very good for their health. So you should cook from scratch, give them real meat, and so on and so forth. We talk about some doctors that think that grains are not great for pets, and then there are some studies that show actually having whole grains in food for pets can actually improve their cardiovascular health long term. So there are all, again, like in human studies, we have all these contradictions, and we know with science, unfortunately, you can pick an angle and you can make sure that you have the case for that angle. So we have to be very, very good at analyzing studies, looking at actual, studies that have value rather than just epidemiological studies or narratives that perhaps are like observational. We want to have some credibility behind what we read, and some people don't really know how to read studies, so we have to also trust the people that are telling us about them. So in this case, I know that your career is based on not only reading the studies but actually doing them and running them. So take me through the health of the pets and this narrative that shows that they have to have animal products, otherwise they would be deficient. Versus what are the options for plant food for animals that would equally, if not more, promote their well-being?
Yeah. So the really easy thing that I ask people to remember, and everybody gets it and has a light bulb moment when I tell them this, I say, don't forget, everybody, dogs and cats, people, all species have no particular biological requirement for meat or any other ingredient. What they have requirements for are nutrients. Nutrients and ingredients are not the same thing. And if you formulate a diet to include all necessary nutrients in the right proportions for dogs, cats, or any other species, the animal should be fine. The other things you need to ensure is it's adequately palatable, so the pets enjoy eating these diets, and also it's adequately digestible so that it can get to the cells in the body and be used. And if you satisfy all those requirements, you should expect the animals to do well. On top of that, if you remove hazards in animal-based pet foods, and that would be animal allergens, four of the top five dietary allergens for dogs are animal-based ingredients. So if you remove animal-based ingredients, which is the most common dietary hazard in conventional pet food, you're likely to get a reduction in problems associated with animal-sourced allergens. So there are now 11 studies showing good health outcomes for dogs maintained on vegan and vegetarian diets, and there are 3 studies showing the same thing for cats. And there's one systematic review. These are studies that provide meta-analyses of many other studies. So they try to pull in all of the scientific evidence on an issue, evaluate it to see which is good quality, and provide overall conclusions. And there's one systematic review covering both species. So all of the studies I've mentioned, 11 in dogs, 3 in cats, in the systematic review covering both species, have confirmed that health outcomes for animals on these diets are as good or better than animals maintained on meat-based pet food. And I always say, provided the diets are formulated to be nutritionally sound, that's essential, whether it's a vegan or a meat-based diet, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And the sorts of benefits we see are the ones associated with eliminating animal-sourced allergens from the diet. So for dogs and cats, we see a reduction in gastrointestinal problems. We see, especially for dogs, a reduction in itchy skin and ear canals. And these are some of the most common health problems in dogs, and they significantly reduce quality of life. So they are reduced or eliminated on nutritionally sound vegan pet food. Another really common health problem in cats, in fact, probably the most common health problem, is being overweight and obese. And this is the second cluster of benefits. Cats and dogs on nutritionally sound vegan diets seem to lose their excess body weight, but those that are normal body weight do not become underweight. And that's strange, and I'm not sure why that is, but it's a clear benefit. Associated benefits seem to be improved mobility and a reduction in musculoskeletal problems. So these are all related to each other, just like the other problems are related to animal-sourced allergens in the diets. So there are those 2 clusters of health benefits which are coming up consistently across these studies. There are no disadvantages that have come up across the studies. So it seems that if you formulate a diet that provides all the necessary nutrients in the right proportions, but you eliminate dietary hazards, then you would expect to get health outcomes which are as good and perhaps better. And that's exactly what all the studies are showing us so far. There are no credible studies showing a contrary result. I mean, there was one very old study in a tiny group of dogs who were rested in cages where they couldn't exercise for about 6 weeks and then forced to run at 12 kilometres an hour on a treadmill for hours every day. And after doing that for 2 weeks, some of them did develop anemia if they were on a vegetarian diet, but not on a meat-based diet. So that's the only credible contrary study. However, that study is the oldest, smallest study with the study conditions that are furthest removed from pet dogs, from dogs in the real world. All the other studies have shown no change or health benefits, as I've described. So the evidence is almost entirely on the side of vegan diets, and so provided that they are formulated to be nutritionally sound.
Okay, so I have another devil's advocate question. When it comes to the pet food that is, we like, okay, well, it's vegan and fine. Like a lot of dogs, though, could be allergic. Perhaps then they could be responding poorly and getting inflammation and getting allergies, not because of the meat per se, but because of the fact that these animals in the cow food industry are given a lot of antibiotics, which destroys the microbiome, and that's equally true for humans and animals. I'm guessing. And also a lot of hormones that will disrupt the endocrine system. So do you feel that it would be different if the pet food were made by small farms? Like, I have a farm and I'm giving my dog like the leftovers of the chickens that I've killed. I'm talking as a vegan. This is really hard for me to say, but you know what I mean? This is the conversation that people would have. In my opinion, as in human nutrition, which is what I specialize in, there is definitely a difference because, antibiotics will kill our microbiome just as well as, and I think animals are affected that way too. And equally, yes, hormone disruptors with hormones that don't really belong to us added on definitely impact our system. And I think that's also true for animals. And I feel like this argument that people bring forth in an ideal world would make sense, but we don't live in that ideal world because most of our food is not made right from these that kind of food, that kind of industry comes from an industry where all this is going on. But they will ask the question because they want to justify buying certain things. So how do you respond when somebody says that?
About 3/4 of all the antibiotics used in the world are used in farmed animals, and about 90% of all the animals that are farmed are intensively farmed. So they're kept in conditions of very high stocking density, crowded closely together, in conditions that are very unhygienic because it's impossible to clean environments well when they're packed full of animals. So the manure and the feces builds up. The animals are chronically stressed by being crowded in these unnatural conditions with minimal environmental enrichment. So chronic stress weakens the immune system. So if you wanted to create an environment for the transmission of disease, this would be a perfect sort of creation. So to try to suppress the outbreaks of disease that would otherwise occur on a large scale, antibiotics are routinely applied within feed and water of intensively farmed animals, which is why this consumes about 3/4 of the world's antibiotics. The trouble is that by constantly providing low levels of antibiotics in the feed, it also creates antibiotic resistance amongst bacteria. So this is the biggest source of drug-resistant bacteria, which is a major public health concern. There are now bacteria emerging that are resistant to all known strains of antibiotics, and if they spread amongst the human population, we literally go back to a pre-antibiotic era where there could be mass mortality. So it's a major public health concern. The other issue is that there are hormones, as you mentioned, which are sometimes fed to livestock animals as hormonal growth promoters to try to increase feed conversion efficiency and slaughter weights and things like that. They're not meant to be used in Europe, but antibiotics are used within Europe a lot. Both of them are meant to be withdrawn a certain number of days prior to slaughter to allow them to wash out of the body. This is called the withholding period. It might be 7 days or it might be longer depending upon what the compound is. There are, sometimes where this doesn't happen, where there are violations of regulations. But in general, this is the case. In general, these products are washed out, so animals or people wouldn't normally be exposed to them. I'd say this does break down, and they are sometimes, but not normally. What they are exposed to every single time they eat is simply animal-sourced allergens. And as I said, this is animal-sourced allergens are 4 of the top 5 sources, dietary allergens in dogs, and they cause gastrointestinal problems, itchy skin, itchy ear canals, which are literally some of the most common health concerns in dogs. So some of the most common health concerns are being caused simply by consuming meat. Occasionally, there might also be impacts of these other factors as well, such as antibiotic residues or hormonal residues, but not normally. But what happens every single time is exposure to animal-sourced allergens for sensitive animals, which is a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, one can argue, though, that when they flush it out, there's still the contact with water, and we know that our water, yes, it's purified, but it still contains a lot of these, and they're not fully taken out. So there is still a recycling that goes into our body and the animal's body. It's a very tough conversation because it's like we cannot get it perfect, but we should just get it as good as we can. But the other question then would be, obviously we know where this food comes from. This is definitely impacting the environment. It's impacting our pets. But then there are some pets that are allergic also to grains. I give you an example, a personal example actually, because it's a very hard one for me to navigate. One of my dogs doesn't do well on vegan pet food because she's allergic to oats, rice. I mean, she started though with being allergic to chicken, turkey, beef, like all of that. This dog can only literally eat duck and venison, which again, it kills me because I'm totally vegan and I have no choice. Otherwise she would not eat anything. And it's like, it's a catch-22 for me. But there are many people that are in this situation, I feel like. How do we navigate when that happens? Because it is hard, especially as a vegan, because all my other dogs can have vegan food, no problem. But this particular one just cannot and won't even eat it. So how do I navigate that? Like if this is happening to someone?
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. As I said, 4 of the top 5 dietary allergens in dogs are animal sourced, but plant-based ingredients can occasionally cause allergic reactions as well. It's important to remember that meat-based pet food, of which 90% plus is dry kibble, is nearly 50% plant materials anyway. So if you're buying meat-based kibble and feeding it to your dog, you are already feeding all sorts of grains, cereals, vegetable ingredients, fruits. They're all actually mixed into it. So you're not going to avoid those by feeding meat-based pet food. They'll already be in there. If you switch to vegan pet food, it's all of the same ingredients minus the animal-based ingredients, essentially. So you are eliminating some of the potential sources of allergens, but not all of them. There are starting to be vegan diets which have been formulated to be hypoallergenic, low allergenic by the companies which are producing vegan pet food. I've actually got a bag of samples with me, and I know there is one down there which is hypoallergenic that I could show you. It is the case that the first vegan diets were developed not to address any concerns about food animal welfare or ethics or the environment, but because they're much less likely to cause allergic reactions than meat-based diets. And so they were accidentally vegan. The intention was to provide proteins from new sources that would be less likely to trigger adverse reactions. And so they've been around for many, many years as veterinary prescription diets to treat allergic conditions, and they happen to be vegan. But you are very unlucky. You have a dog, unfortunately, that seems to be allergic to some of the plant-based ingredients as well. All I could suggest would be to go through the full list of vegan pet food suppliers and see if any of them have low allergy diets. And I know that this particular company has, and I have a bag of it here with me today.
We can totally share it because it's good for everyone to know anyway. So after, if you show it for the YouTube watchers, we can actually show them the bag, and then we'll put the link on the show notes for the listeners that are listening on Spotify or Apple and so on. So it'd be really good because it's tough. It's really tough.
Sure. Okay. Well, here's a couple. This is for sensitive tummies, and this is for shiny coats, and both of those are less likely to trigger gastrointestinal reactions and skin reactions.
Okay,
and it
good.
can sometimes be because they have been formulated with ingredients that are less likely to trigger these adverse reactions, and sometimes because they have positive nutrients in them as well, such as things like omega-3 and vitamin E, which can help the skin, for example. Yeah. So they're produced by Omni, which is one of the big vegan pet food companies in the UK. Okay. And that's a company which has been set up by vets and has got a lot of vets working for it, and they're very much interested in maximising animal health. But there are other ones as well, I believe, in Europe.
We will have to probably put a list together if you don't mind. I know you have that list. You have some options because it is harder, I found, here in Europe to find them. I was buying Benevo. From a Portuguese stocker, but with Brexit it became impossible, especially because I rescued 20 plus dogs. I kept 6, 8 actually, but 2 of them, one passed away and the other one has been adopted. But it's tough because of course we have to also think about the economics, which is an important part we should talk about. But so if you have list of European companies, and I know there's a Spanish one I can share as well, but it is harder because of course in the UK things are more advanced in this sector. I feel like they make more of an effort, and it's not necessarily mimicked and mirrored in Europe all the time, at least not in Southern Europe. So maybe there are brands in Germany and Netherlands that maybe are doing better. When it comes to cats though, and that is always the one that comes up, and I thought that was the same. People will say, but they are, they are carnivores, they are obligatory carnivores. Look at their teeth, look at what they do, there would be essential nutrients that would be missing from the diet. How do we tackle that?
Again, the fact that they're obligate carnivores simply means that in their natural environments, they're required to hunt and kill a variety of small mammals, birds, insects, to get all the nutrients that they need. That's got no relevance to a domesticated house cat that normally consumes a meat-based kibble, which would include body parts from animals that would never naturally hunt, such as cows, fish, and so on, with all sorts of unnatural additives, nearly 50% plant-based materials, and supplied in formulations such as dry kibble with flavorants, colorants, preservatives, antifungals, antimicrobials, and so on, and then fed at predictable times every day. So the feeding regime of a domesticated house cat bears little resemblance to the feeding regime of an ancestral cat. So domesticated house cats are omnivores anyway, because they're eating food which has got a lot of plant-based material in it normally. None of this is relevant to what a cat actually needs biologically. As I mentioned before, what they need is a diet that supplies all the necessary nutrients in the right proportions and adequately digestible and palatable. And modern vegan pet food companies aim to formulate exactly those kinds of diets. So they're already fully supplemented with all the nutrients that cats require. So if you are purchasing a diet and it says on the packaging, this is nutritionally complete and balanced, suitable for an adult cat or a young cat or an old cat or whatever it might be, and you're getting it from a good company that can supply some basic information about steps taken to ensure nutritional soundness, and that might be the diet's been formulated to meet the nutritional requirements of European authorities, or it might be they're working with veterinary nutritional specialists to make sure the diet's nutritionally sound. There needs to be some kind of information that is reassuring. Then people shouldn't need to worry about this. Your pet should be fine on such a diet normally.
Yeah, I mean, I like my pets. My cats also have a vegan diet, but I let them also roam on the farm and they kill things. And I'm like, okay, don't bring it to me. But I understand it's the cycle of life, and they're happy with that. So the other, but I would like actually to ask this when it comes to cats that perhaps have kidney issues, because seems to, and urinary tract issues. They seem to have a lot of them. Cats seem to be so sensitive and getting more UTIs or UT problems and kidney problems. Can a plant-based diet support that too?
Yes, it can. So you're right. I mean, inflammation of the bladder, cystitis, is a fairly common health problem in cats. There was a concern that this might be more common feeding a vegan diet, because the urine can become more alkaline, and that can cause these problems to become more common. But when the large-scale studies were done looking at thousands of cats, one that we did, and also another one conducted at the University of Guelph, which is one of the leading veterinary schools in Canada, I should say. Neither of those studies have actually found an increased rate of these problems in cats that are maintained on vegan diets. So it's not actually a concern on average. Individual cats, of course, may be different from the average in all sorts of ways, as with dogs, but people don't need to worry that there's an increased risk of these problems on vegan diets.
I heard from a naturopathic doctor that treats animals as well. We were talking about solutions. We were concerned. The concern was alkaline environment in the urinary tract, and he said adding some vitamin C in water for the cats can help acidify the urine.
For cats on a meat-based diet or a vegan diet, any diet that are having problems of this kind with the urine, if it's found to be because the urine is too alkaline, then there are a range of things that can be added into the diet to acidify, including vitamin C. And there's certain dosages that can be used, and there are strong things as well that can be added. And that's something for people to discuss with their vets. Firstly, you've got to confirm what the problem is and whether it is actually caused by alkaline urine, not something else. And if so, what is the appropriate thing to be adding into the diet to try to address that? Not all of these are fixable by adding things into the diet. Sometimes other treatments are needed. But as I say, there's no greater risk of these problems on a vegan diet compared to a meat-based diet.
Perfect. Now some myth I want to just demystify, because you mentioned, cats don't hunt fish. And again, when we talk about cats, when they are kittens, everybody's giving them cow milk. And then when they are adults, they're like, they love fish, let's give them tuna and salmon. And I'm like, I'm sure they're not swimming in the ocean to get this. So why did they become like this, the staples for cats when actually they don't actually hunt them in the real world?
Absolutely. And there's this author called Jed Gillen who addresses this point really well in his book, Obligate Carnivore. And he says, if you want to see how natural this is for cats, even though cats often do seem to love eating fish, try this experiment. Skip your cat's breakfast one morning, bring him or her down to the beach instead, observe your cat closely to see what natural instincts might kick in. Specifically, watch to see whether your cat will splash out into the water, swim 50 miles or so out in the deep ocean to battle an adult tuna fish, which could be as large as a small horse, in an underwater battle to the death to fulfill a natural feline diet of fish. The idea that they would actually do this is absurd. They are notoriously hydrophobic. Have you ever tried to give your cat a bath?
God.
So he addresses that really well. So he makes the point that dogs and cats and other species have the ability to enjoy ingredients that are entirely unnatural to them. And of course, much of what goes into dog and cat food today is very unnatural. It's body parts from species they wouldn't naturally hunt, with all sorts of grains, cereals, vegetables, fruits, along with preservatives, colorants, flavorants, antifungals, humectants, antimicrobials, and then packaged up into dry kibble after going through high temperature and pressure processing, which can affect some of the nutrients, and then needing to be supplemented afterwards with synthetic nutrients to make up for the damage that's been caused by processing. So the result is very far removed from a natural diet of an ancestral dog or cat.
Yeah, very good points. Let's not watch Garfield for guidance on nutrition for cats, please.
Yes, please. Let's not do that.
No.
Thank you.
There was actually a controversy about this movie too, because someone pointed out that the dairy industry they sponsor many movies. They sponsor the Garfield movie, which is why you see Garfield eating so much cheese. So cats don't eat cheese, guys. Point.
Good grief. That just shows the reach and power of the dairy industry and the extent to which they will spend some of their fortune to maximize sales and influence popular culture, including our movies.
Yeah, and we don't realize that happens. It's such a subliminal, brainwashing that happens when we're watching a movie. I think it's normal, so of course. Unbelievable. Okay, before we close, I know we're running out of time, and I'm very, very aware of your busy schedule. Tell me a little bit more about your not-for-profit, your charity, how we can get involved, how can we contribute. If you are looking for volunteers even, how could they pitch in? Just tell me everything.
Sure. I mean, I have a couple of non-profits. I have one that just enabled me to leave my full-time university job and just do all the advocacy I do on animal welfare issues and all the communication I do. That's called Representing Animals. And I have another one I've just set up just to focus on nutritionally sound plant-based pet foods, and that's called the Sustainable Pet Food Foundation. So if anyone wants to support either of those, please find me on the internet and get in touch.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. That was really enlightening. I know we could have gone in much more details. People might have questions, and I will prompt them to get in touch with you so they can learn more through your association. I feel that this is a very important topic. I'm glad that we could speak about it, at least in a high level, to make people think, even though they need more education and need to trust, and we should get more and more vets to perhaps learn from you. So maybe in the future there will be even online platforms where you can maybe share educational material for vets to talk about nutrition, because I think that's a very big gap definitely that I've seen, and we know that the industry is very powerful. I've seen representative of the usual brands that will promote their food in such a powerful way, and I know that vets really believe they're doing something good, because I don't think there is one vet that wants to harm an animal. Like, they all want to heal and help and support. But there are things to consider, and this is the same for humans. So I see these parallels happening, which is why for me it was a really important subject that I wanted to bring on the podcast. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much. I've just started communicating this information to veterinary audiences in the UK and Europe, and I'd like to do a lot more of that. As you say, there's a great need for that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much. Look forward to it.
Bye. Thank you, Dr. Knight. And thank you, everyone, for staying onto the podcast. I think this might spark a little bit of debate online, but that's actually also fun if we keep it civilized, because we can really discuss the options that we have, but also our thoughts in a mindful manner. Now, when we learn something, there is always space to change our mind. And I think that's a beautiful human flexibility ability that we have if we use it. And so I love when people are like, oh, I learned this, I didn't know, maybe I'll try it out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It's okay, but at least we can be open to new information, and that's really how we grow. So guys, if you're listening to this episode, please do leave a review, I beg of you. And if you're not subscribed to our YouTube, please do so. A lot of people are listening but not clicking that button, and I really need you to follow so that we can grow. The more we get growing, the more we can have amazing speakers on the podcast. And I really want to make this a beautiful, informational, and educational platform. So guys, if you want to learn more about me, you can go onto my website. I've linked everything on the show notes, and I have everything for our guest as well. I'll see you next week. Bye.